So on a practical level, what might it mean for each of us to live out these qualities, not just in a conceptual, theoretical way, certainly not just on Sunday morning as people are hearing the sermon. I wonder what it might look like on a daily basis to live out those qualities. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, doing anything daily is hard. I would say that something that I try is with my kids, and every day I have an opportunity to interact with my 2 stepsons and my 4-year-old son, and figuring out how those values of empathy, curiosity, and humility can just open them up to wanting to connect more deeply, right? Sometimes as a parent, we come in with none of those values. We come in with, hey, here's what has to happen next. Here's what I need you to do. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? But instead of the accusational kind of why questions, to really come in with that first thought being, hey, how are you? That empathy towards them. Definitely not sympathy, because I don't remember what it was like to be 13, 10, 4 years old, but really just go, hey, what's going on? And if they don't want to talk about it, that's okay. Curiosity sometimes as a parent can be a double-edged sword. You pry a little too far, right? Yeah. And then humility, I think, is that thing that helps me not lose hope sometimes. Because sometimes I will think, oh, I should be able to do this, right? And sometimes you might know as a parent, it doesn't always go the way that you thought it might go. And that humility is also towards ourself, right? We should be humble that we don't have all the answers, but also that humility is something we can offer ourselves. You often talk about being gentle with yourselves, right? I think that humility is another way when it's turned inward, allows us to say, hey, that interaction with my 13-year-old didn't go great today. That's okay. Like, I'm not a bad parent. My relationship with him isn't forever flawed. It's going to be okay. So I think just like empathy can kind of be that front door to get in, humility is that thing that almost keeps us in the room when it gets tough. It allows us to not spiral into thoughts of our own inadequacies or that kind of stuff. It allows us to think just enough of ourselves that we matter, but not so much that anything, right? Humility is double-edged, because if you think about humility as, well, I'm too good and you have to bring it down, but really there's also this part of humility that sometimes we beat ourselves up too much. And a humble spirit actually breaks the middle ground of that and allows you to just be in this healthy place of self-acceptance to do the work of empathy and curiosity and humility.
That's beautiful. I had a friend say to me, even before I became a parent, he said, I cannot raise my children to have the values that I want for them if I'm not willing to demonstrate those values myself. Mm. And what of us parents would not want our children to grow up being empathetic, curious, and humble? I mean, I think that's an ideal trifecta, right, for any of us parents. And we have to always remember, as imperfect as we may be, and as try as we hard as we do, we need to exhibit those qualities because our kids are watching. And that's a good reminder for us. Humility can be a double-edged sword. I've wrestled with that for much of my life. What does humility mean? Does it mean that I'm nothing? Does it mean that I'm dirt? And I've said this in sermons and in teachings before, that the root word for humility is humus, which means ground. Mm-hmm. So humility doesn't mean considering yourself to be nothing. It means being grounded, getting a sense of interconnection, sharing the same earth and air as every other living thing. It suggests interdependence and interconnectivity, where not any one of us is more important or less important than another, that I is we, that all of us together are important. And if that becomes the orienting work of our lives, that affects the way I relate to other people, including my enemies, including strangers. That relates the way churches relate to each other. That relates to the way communities relate to each other, nations, and on and on. Not long ago, you led a staff devotional on John 15, the word abide, mm-hmm. where Jesus said, I am the vine, you are the branches. It is a perfect metaphor for what you're talking about, mm-hmm. about humility, that all of us are connected to each other. None of us are more important or less important than the other person.
So if you had to pick empathy, curiosity, and humility, which would you say is the most important?
I would say empathy. I wouldn't say it's more important than the other three, but I would say it's more urgent now, given the conditions of the world, than the other three. It's just the times we live in. We have a hard time opening ourselves up to seeing the worth and dignity and listening for the story of other people. But I wouldn't single it out to the point where, you need curiosity and humility in order to do the work of empathy. But I would say, as you look at the world today, we could use a lot more empathy in our relationships.